I am really looking forward to this session. We're going to dig into how to build financially viable models for responsible recruitment. We're going to hear directly from recruiters who are doing that, and we're going to learn their lessons. So we're going to dive straight in. If you think you have a post-lunch lull, spare a thought for our two virtual panelists for whom it is 2 in the morning. So with huge thanks and appreciation, I will introduce them in just a second. My name is Anna Pinar. I'm the Executive Director of the Responsible Labour Initiative, which is part of the wider Responsible Business Alliance. We provide practical tools for implementation of responsible recruitment, due diligence, and forced labor issues in supply chains. Part of that has been, over the past 5 years, we've implemented a program called the Responsible Recruitment Program, funded by the Walmart Foundation and partnering with the IOM, International Organization for Migration, to build the capacity of recruitment agencies coming from Indonesia into Malaysia, Nepal into Malaysia, and connected to our member supply chains. And so I am delighted to introduce our panelists here. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and I want to hear from each of you how you're connected and how your role and your organization is supporting responsible recruitment. I believe we have Carmel and Pranay on the line. We do. This is wonderful. Okay, Carmel, can you hear us? And we can see you. Would you like to introduce yourself and give us a sense of what your role is and how you're supporting responsible recruitment, please? Hopefully the video will start working. Could we get her voice, even if it's not video? Well, while we're working on that, let's hear from Pavel. Pavel, go ahead and introduce yourself and how you're connected to the world of responsible recruitment.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, everyone, for having me today with you. I'm Pavel Szalus from the International Organization for Migration, IOM. And IOM is an intergovernmental organization. It's the UN Migration Agency. We heard a lot today in a keynote speaker about the importance of the labor migration, how it affects the demographics, global economy, the labor market, and all the other things. We also understand this in IOM as well. That's why the labor migration is an important part of the IOM's work. And as such, we also know that fair and ethical recruitment is a critical part of the good governance of labor migration. And also it's important to fulfill the development potential of labor migration, which labor migration brings itself, because that's how we perceive also the labor migration, fair and ethical recruitment, but it's a positive thing, which we should not be scared or afraid of, and there's a huge development potential if it's done in the right way. And in IOM, we have the very comprehensive stream of work related to recruitment with the whole range of tools, solutions, partnerships, and I mentioned just one, programs implemented globally. For us at IOM, it's obvious that labor migration is a good thing. We talked about it a couple of times today, just to reinstate it. And this is something not to be afraid of or be scared of, right? And it's happening anyways. You just need to embrace it. We also know that well-governed labor migration and recruitment has a huge benefit potential which outweigh the challenges. At the same time at IOM, we recognize that there are challenges, right? If it's not done in the right way. We heard today the story of real migrant workers talking about the challenges and struggles they do. We do recognize those things. And we work a lot with partners around the world to overcome the challenges and take the best what the well-managed labor migration can get. And we truly believe through our daily work, we learn it and we truly believe in this, but the only way to make it work is through multi-stakeholder joint venture, which is executed through something we call at IOM, from the ground level all the way to our Director General, whole of society, whole of the government approach. And when you talk about the whole of society, whole of the government approach, we're talking about both sides of the process. The countries and communities of origin engage with the countries and communities of destination, and that's where it works, right? And I want to emphasize it because it's important. Sometimes we understand whole of society, whole of the government in the destination country. We don't care about the origin, or the vice versa. It has to be on both sides of the process. I'll stop here because I guess my 5 minutes is over. Thank you.
Thank you, Pavel. Let's see if we can get Carmel and Pranay on the line. No? Okay, not yet. Well, I'll go ahead with the questions for Powell. So the purpose of this session is really to dig into how to make responsible recruitment an attractive business model and investment. And our learning, certainly from the RLI side through the responsible recruitment program, is that the majority of the participants have challenges in implementing a no-fees model across all of their business operations. And to really qualify as a fully no fees, in the IRIS certification, as well as most sort of certifications that are working with recruitment agencies, you have to implement that policy across all corridors for all of your customers. And if you're a recruitment agency that comes across an employer that will not bear the full cost of recruitment, that then is a challenge on you. And from our perspective as RVA, RLI, that would be a finding on the recruitment agency as well as on the supplier, right? But you can't be a fully certified, or you can't get to the full verification stage without all of the employers that you're providing workers to bearing that cost of recruitment. And so that mixed business model that currently still exists, and Pavel also, you could maybe comment on this, is part of the key challenge of how do we actually make this financially viable? Because what we hear from recruitment agencies is this the need to have that subsidy and work with both models, right? So we have a fee model and a no fee model, but it really completely depends on whether or not the employer is bearing that full cost. And the recruitment agencies are often trying to sort of, the ones certainly in the IRIS program I know are working with the employer, sort of working back up the supply chain to say, look, we want you to bear this cost. And if the employer is not willing, as I said, that becomes a challenge. Carmel and Pranay, thank you so much for joining us. So glad we can see you and hear you. So Carmel, why don't we go ahead and start with your introduction. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and what role you play in the world of responsible recruitment? Oh, just give us a second because we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
There you go. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm the managing director at Honest Jobs. Honest Jobs is part of the Fair Employment Foundation group of entities. And our mission at FAIR is to build market-based solutions to end forced labor of migrant workers. And in 2014, we launched Fair Employment Agency, which is a revenue-generating ethical recruitment agency placing domestic workers here in Hong Kong. Since we launched, we've placed over 8,000 workers free from recruitment debt and is now one of the top recruitment agencies for Filipino workers here in Hong Kong. And then when we then launched Honest Jobs in 2020 as an early stage incubator fund to influence and grow the ethical recruitment industry. We set up originally Honest Jobs after facing regulatory challenges and initially trying to set up our own sending side employment agency in the Philippines back in 2019. From our learnings there, we realized that we needed to localize our approach instead of building fair agencies in different markets. Through Honest Jobs, we can replicate and spread our influence and model for ethical recruitment much more quickly while reducing country-specific risk. Local social entrepreneurs who share our values are also better positioned to navigate country regulations. And at Honest Jobs, not only do we provide funding, but we also leverage our on-the-ground experience and networks and provide mentorship and advisory support to early stage and established businesses with the goal of growing the responsible recruitment sector across other geographies and industries beyond domestic work. We collaborate with a wide network of actors as we set out to build an ecosystem of ethical recruiters. Since we launched, we have invested in 2 agencies thus far. Our first investment is in Pink Collar, which is Malaysia's first ethical recruitment agency. They were established in 2019, and we invested in the team in late 2020. The young team has been resilient and managed to keep their doors open through the pandemic with the borders closed and are seeing early signs of business sustainability. They were even profitable last year. And they have just upgraded their license earlier this year, which will allow them to recruit and place outside of just the domestic worker sector. Late last year, we invested in our second agency, Good Hire, out of Singapore, which is also tackling the migrant domestic worker sector. They were established in 2016 and steadily growing through 2019 until the pandemic. And we're supporting the founder in marketing and operational expansion. And today on this panel, I hope to share our perspective and market insights as an investor, as well as our on-the-ground experiences and challenges from our investees' perspective. Thank you.
That's fantastic, Carmel. Thank you so much. I'm so glad we can learn from your experience. And it really goes to Rebecca's point this morning about needing to build this new industry. And you are on the ground doing that. So we can't wait to learn from you. Pranay, go ahead and tell us about yourself and what brings you to the world of responsible recruitment.
Okay. Namaste, everybody. My name is Pranay Rai. I head the compliance team of International Manpower Recruitment. And when we are talking about international manpower recruitment, we were established in the year 2004. But during the year 2015 and 16, we came to know about what ethical recruitment was about, because we were mentored and we happened to attend a workshop conducted by Responsible Business Alliance in the year 2016. And then we tried to adopt the ethical recruitment practice. And to let you know, during the year 2016, we were among the top agencies of Nepal, where in terms of deployment of the workers. And then we adopted a hybrid system of hybrid model in the sense that we took up demands of both ethical and unethical. And till the year 2018 came in, we were confident enough that we could get into 100% ethical recruit. And then from 18 till date, it's been about 7 years. And I must tell you that it's been about 7 years. And given the opportunity, and if we see to the chart in terms of deployment of the workers from Nepal amongst all the agencies, we are leading the chart, which means that ethical recruitment is being accepted. And we hope to sustain ourselves. We hope to do well and be an example in the industry, so that people also adopt this model of recruitment. Thank you.
That's fantastic. And congratulations, Pranay, for demonstrating that it can be done, that it's viable. And thank you for being here to be able to learn from you so that we can really share these lessons with others. So I'll jump into the first question. And Pranay, if we stay with you, could you give us an up-close sense of those challenges that you faced in terms of achieving that financial viability? Tell us a little bit more up close what that's like for you and how that has impacted your ability to responsibly recruit workers.
All right. Without a doubt, of course, ethical recruitment is more time intensive and costly. So if you look at the recruitment process, what has happened is I'd like to put it in 5 points. So that would be the administrative requirements are very demanding in the sense that there's a lot of paperwork to be done, and a lot time consuming, where we have to be meticulous on planning each and every recruit. And of course, in terms of sustainability, when we are talking about financial viability, yes, the service fee is very limited in the sense that we have a very small margin, and having to give up with the traditional recruitment, of course, it's sometimes it's very intensive, yes, we are not really relying on individual brokers now. We have given up with sub-agents, which means that we got to communicate each and every candidate on our own, and having to conduct village campaign, where we do the village campaigning by having to directly source the workers. That becomes very costly. And we conduct due diligence of our employees as well, as being a responsible recruiter, and having to spend all the expenses, having to visit the destination country, do the due diligence, is very costly. And last but not the least, of course, when we have to, we need to ensure that we retain the best of our employees within our team. So to do that, we have to have a very good salary package and the welfare opportunities for our within our company as well.
That's great. Can I just ask a follow-up question? Did you say that you conduct due diligence in the destination country on the employers themselves?
Yes, we do conduct employee due diligence. We try and make it a point. We've got two ways of doing the employee due diligence. One is on-site visit, by having to visit the premises of the employers, And the second one is we do it on a remote level in the sense that we go to the social media pages, we serve the internet, and then we try and manage the risk.
Wow, so you do sort of an open source scan of them. That's great. That's fantastic. Carmel, same question to you on the challenges of financial viability. You've obviously seen this up close, running an organization, running a recruitment agency yourself, but then also investing in new ones. Tell us about that.
Yes, it's similar to Pranay. I mean, he's working in supply chain, and I think we're seeing similar challenges in the domestic worker sector that is in parallel. So firstly, there's definitely unfair competition in our space. There's unfair competition with the recruitment market currently that we're seeing in the 3 markets, competing with unethical agencies charging fees to domestic workers in order to cover the true cost of migrant labor recruitment. And as an ethical agency, it is hard to compete in that type of market, right? Margins are very thin and small, competition is unfair, and expectations are high, especially if employers are unwilling to pay extra for ethical recruitment. And secondly, as mentioned, there are thin margins, especially in the Hong Kong and Singaporean market. Thin margins makes running a business much more complicated, right? We have 2 of our agencies, the ones that we've invested in, are social enterprises. Our agency in Hong Kong is wholly owned and operated by our foundation, so we're able to get grant funding for the agency to help them through COVID. But there's also limited options for staffing and compensation and benefits, complicating like the talent pool to attracting and retention as well, at least staffing an ethical agency. And with the limited cash flow to adjust to new market challenges and other external factors, during COVID restrictions, new regulations like in Singapore, where agencies are now obligated to reimburse up to 50% of the placement fees if a worker doesn't last 6 months on a job, which forces the market to increase their prices. And the agencies that don't are most likely finding ways to charge the worker to make the regulations financially feasible. So we're seeing like employers that are still very price averse in these markets. And lastly, in our experience in Malaysia, the cost of recruitment is also a major challenge. There's the tangible recruitment costs and the intangible recruitment costs, which are, staff salaries, the labor. These are higher because of inefficient government procedures, manual applications, slow approvals versus in Singapore, which everything is online, which also challenges the post-placement work required for competent hires. Okay, what we know is that in particular, sorry, I'm hearing
Yes,
music.
carry on. Yes, no, you're good. Do continue.
What we know is that Pink Collar has a higher headcount than other traditional agencies because they do need additional labor to sustain things to do the ethical way, right? So all of that are challenges in all 3 markets.
And can I ask you a follow-up question?
Sure.
As an investor, do you find, what's your sense, is it easier if there are, as we're building this new industry, to create new social enterprises? Is that easier than switching from the traditional model to the no-fees model?
Could you repeat that? Sorry,
Yes,
the music came on.
I'm just curious, is it easier if you're doing this sort of initially as we begin that road toward building the new industry? Is it easier to invest in a new social enterprise, to set up an organization or a company that from the get-go is a no-fees model, versus switching the existing recruiters who are currently charging fees to a no-fees model? Which one, as an investor, is an easier approach?
I think for us, at least from our experience, it's only been with existing, early stage enterprises, if not a single proprietor that had not been charging recruitment fees to workers. For us, it was easier because then they understand our mission and values, and we support them through operational expansion and mentorship and advising. I think what will be difficult in transitioning of some group that is from an unethical agency to one that is ethical. I think those existing mechanisms that are in place that might be harder to undo But Pranay was able to do it, so maybe he can share a bit more of how that was
He's
done.
leading
But
the
from
way.
an investor perspective, at least for us, we don't only put in money, right? We really spend the time and effort and a lot of our knowledge and know-how to support operationally based on our experience. So we provide that as well.
That's brilliant. Thank you. So that capacity building, we'll come back to that maybe in terms of the accompaniment that's needed. But Pavel, tell us a little bit from your sense of the up close in terms of the challenges of financially viable in the IRIS program, what your experience is of that journey that recruitment agencies have to make to reach that and how it impacts their ability to ethically recruit workers.
Sure, thank you, Anna. We already heard from the recruiter's experience, so maybe I'll try to put the perspective on the other side, the demand side, the employers, and then employee-based principle. So in our experience where we are working with employers and with the recruiters, we identify a couple of challenges for the financial viability of this. And I won't be saying anything new, and a lot of things will be already, you will hear from me what you already heard today even in the room. But this time we're talking in a financial context, right? So now we are talking money. That's why it's making it exciting a little bit more, right? So one thing is definitely the issue of fees and costs, interpretation, definition, and recognition, right? There's still challenge out there to comprehend which costs actually are the ones that should be absorbed, which are not. There's still a bit of a pick and choose on different files. There's still kind of gray zones which allow to interpret differently, and people saying, well, I do ethical recruitment, I follow employee-based principle. But as we heard from the recruiters, and my colleague Matthias said, well, but we didn't know that it's actually employee pays it all principle, right? So these kind of things are still out there. Solution to this is simple. There's an ILO definition, which says exactly what those costs are, in which circumstances they need to be absorbed, right? Yes, it's a tough one, right? But they was collectively agreed, it was recognized and picked up by IRIS, picked up by RLI, RBA, and all the others, right? And as long as we understand that's the direction of travel, we are committed and we are getting there, it's okay, right? But we need to embrace it, right? So that's one of the challenges which we see, which is actually stumbling block in this one. The other one also related to fees and costs. It's not just about the fees and costs for the uptake of and making it financially viable element. The other element is also on the employer side, who should actually pay those employee pays, who should actually pay those costs as per the employee pays principle. And there's still conversations about it. Is it the direct employer who is doing it, supplier in the context of global supply chains? Or should there be also some engagement or participation by the brand behind or the vendor, anybody else higher up in that sense? So that's still, there's a challenge, and depending whom you talk to, there's a different understanding related to it. So, but it's really important to crack that nut. Who is participating in absorbing the employee-based principle, those costs, to make sure that this is economically viable model for the employers. And I'll give you one very quick example. I promise not to digress too much, Anna. Is we've been having a lot of conversations in one of the countries, I won't mention the name of the country, when there's a big movement going on, and then everybody wants to do it, but one part is saying it should be done on the direct employers. Employers saying, well, we would like to do it, but our margins are relatively thin, so we need a bit of a help from above. Well, we can't help you, but you have to still do it, right? So it's a bit more complicated, in that sense, right? But there are also other solutions related to it, right? And help doesn't necessarily always mean putting the money financially. There are different ways, just being smart about it, right? So some considerations related to cracking the nut of the employee-based principle to make it economically viable, from our experience, is it is important to understand, and we spoke about this with Andy during the lunch break, where you recruit the workers from and how do you recruit the workers, right? Because that actually can influence the cost of migration and as well cost of the recruitment, right? In that sense, so that's one element. Then another element, without going too much into details, we can talk about it later on. And another element also related to the employers to make it financially viable for them is how the recruitment fees and costs can be translated into the services and goods produced with the help of recruited migrant workers, right? And there's unfortunately tendency in thinking out there that shifting the costs of recruitment on the employers will increase significantly the price of goods and services to the consumers, right? The evidence that we see, from the evidence that we see, it looks like that if the recruitment is done smartly and responsibly, this is not actually the case, right? And there's a growing body of evidence that actually doesn't have to be. So there's a big elephant in the room, okay, how do you do it? But yeah, if you look closer, do the proper analysis, plan smartly, something what we heard from IMR, yes, it's a lot of time and investment, but if you do it right at the beginning, then it's possible to do it, and then you benefit from having it right. And to do the recruitment smartly and responsibly, that brings me to my next and last point related to this issue, which is making the economically and financially viable ethical recruitment is not just about the fees and costs. It is about putting in place those systems which we heard from IMR and we heard also from we also heard from Cierto, putting those systems in place by the recruiters, but also by the employers, to help them optimize the recruitment process. And when we talk about the systems, we are not talking about what William was saying. We are not talking about the AI. We are not talking about the apps and the other things. We are talking about the simple solutions, simple mechanism, which will make the whole process much more efficient and risk-free, right?
So management systems.
Essentially, well, management system is a word which everybody's like, whoa, it sounds super complex, super smart, I don't know. No, we're talking about simple mechanisms, right? Writing down what I do, how I can improve it, just reading it through and saying, okay, how I can improve it. There's a whole body of good tools out there. Yes, to put the system in place, as we heard it from IMR, it's an investment. You need to invest time, you need to invest resources. But what we've been hearing from our work or within IOM, not just IRIS, is that actually take pays back, right? And the good thing for the recruiters and employees out there, I would say, is there's really no need at this point of time, unlike it was a couple of years ago, to reinvent the wheel. There's already a whole plethora of good calibrated tools and the solutions already available, and the recruiters, right, whom others can learn from. IMR, Cierto, we heard about recruiters over here. There's recruiters in Africa, there are recruiters in Europe who actually do it, right? And they can tell how to make it work, right? There's really no need to reinvent the wheel. It's just grab it and run with it. I'll just stop here.
That's great, Pavel. And also picking up on your point about not reinventing the wheel and the question of fees and the fact that they change, that's another place where sort of our collective action can really come into play. RBA has a definition of fees. It's based on the ILO. That's a public document, but we need to keep updating it. We also, Verite provides for us a regularly updated labor migration corridor database that provides all of the updated fees. It's updated about every 6 months about the different legal changes in each country, each corridor, and that way it can really inform things like remediation, coming down to the practical, when findings are come to light. Coming back to you, Pranay, I'd love to hear your perspective about how this has been sort of a marketing tool for your organization. The fact that you're an ethical recruiter, how has that helped you?
Okay, to put it simply, what has happened is since we've given up the hybrid model, we are doing it 100% ethically. So when our employers know that it's only the 100% ethical recruitment company that we take up as for the recruitment, that has been an advantage for us. And then the second thing is, like whenever there is a visible event going on, like for example, I can give you an example of UAE Expo 2020, and then there was this Qatar World Cup 2020 that happened. There was a spike of there was a lot of demand of the workers. Like we could come in contact with a lot of employers who wanted to recruit workers ethically. So that was another advantage where we could market ourselves. And it is also saying that identifying the customers, like how we happen to identify customers, like we are more concentrated on the manufacturing companies more, because like manufacturing companies are ones who would be exporting their products from the destination country, and this actually enables and actually emphasizes the employer to follow ethical recruitment. And last but not the least, we've also seen that just as international manpower, when we were transitioning, there has been companies who are approaching us by having transitioned as an ethical recruit, as I believe it is because of the buyers' pressure, and then the media reports on allegation of forced labor, that a lot of companies are shifting towards ethical recruitment for ethical recruitment.
That's great. So follow-up questions. So does that mean that you've become sort of a mentor to others in this space that are looking to you to know how to do it?
Well, in the first thing, like I said, if we are able to lead the chart in terms of deployment, all of the other agencies would certainly want to follow us, and then inspire them to take up this model of ethical recruitment.
That's great. Can I ask one more follow-up question? The challenge that we often find, or certainly that I hear from RBA members, is the need to recruit large numbers of workers, and suppliers often having significant times of pressure in manufacturing, needing to produce a product on a short time scale. How does that impact you? Because you're still trying to do it ethically, but are you able to reach that level of scale?
Yes, I must tell you that we've come across employers who's been very generous enough to have only appointed us in some parts where even the recruitment orders are high, and we make it a point. And like I said, we've got a team at International Manpower where we've nurtured, we have cultured, we have spent so much in our team effort, team building effort, that we are able to take up a large number of recruits as well.
Mm-hmm. So it's all hands on deck in that situation. You just get it done. Great. Carmel, over to you. I'm interested to hear from you. We've been talking a lot today about the role of, everyone is needed. Everyone plays a different role in this, to achieve this goal. I'd love to hear from you what you think is needed. From your perspective, what do you need governments to do? What do you need suppliers to do? Investors? What's your call to action?
Sure. Thanks for that question, Anna. I think first, in terms of governments, there's a question around adherence and compliance to international standards, right? You have different both country risks and regulations. And in the case of Hong Kong, there's the market is it's one of the best places for migrant workers to work in. There's high salaries for workers, and most importantly, develop regulatory frameworks, including minimum wage, mandatory rest day, sick leave, maternity leave, etc. There's just issues around law enforcement, and particularly in relation to worker placement fees. In Hong Kong, there's a maximum of 10% worker fees allowed by law, but majority of agencies are still charging more, but very few agencies are reprimanded or have their license revoked. So if more agency licenses were revoked for not following laws, that would also lead to more agencies adopting ethical recruitment practices, we believe. And in Singapore, the biggest influence also would be government, removing the ability to charge workers for placement fees. In that market, it is allowed for agencies to charge up to 2 months of salary, which is, again, misaligned with regulations from the international standards. And of course, clear employment contract terms, current government mandates contracts for countries of origins do not outline sick leave or terms on public holidays. There's a lot of room for interpretation, causing confusion and making employment relations more vulnerable to tension and also exploitation. And I think secondly, for employers, both individual that we're of course, we have access to, or that's our majority of our market, is employers for domestic workers. But I guess this also relates to brands and suppliers. It's like awareness raising, right? So a majority of individual employers and brands may not understand the issues and consequences of unethical recruitment. Employers, if they therefore don't see the value of engaging ethical recruitment actors Brands need to take their responsibility and ensure ethical recruitment practices of migrant workers as well. This requires brands to look for and support and help grow ethical recruitment through constructive partnerships, I believe. Our challenge is currently at the Honest Jobs level is finding more mission-aligned partners that we can work with to accelerate impact and be able to build a constellation of ethical recruitment enterprises to ultimately transform our industry. And lastly, investors and funders, right? This is the space we occupy, but also ethical actors don't make the same level of profit as their unethical counterparts. It's difficult to attract capital. Majority of impact investors currently are still very focused on commercial returns. Reaching scale is particularly challenging for ethical recruiters, and it's still a nascent industry, and we need support from funders and impact investors to help it grow. I honestly do believe forced labor is a solvable world problem, one that we can solve in our lifetime, and we need to not only identify the bad actors and practices in our industry and be reactionary, but we also need to proactively fund and support the growth of ethical recruitment actors as a preventative measure as well. And so investment and funding the growth and sustainability of ethical recruitment while the market moves towards making responsible recruitment an industry norm is really vital in making this happen.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Carmel. That's very well put. Pavel, over to you in terms of what your call to action is to governments, to employers, to all these different actors to achieve our goal.
Thank you. Maybe I'll start again based on our learnings and trying to make it work. Maybe I'll start with brands. We have a lot of brands or brand representative corporate people here. From our learnings, we need more brands who actually engage and support with the suppliers, right? And less those who are just pushing it on the suppliers, right? In that sense, because it has to work together for the reasons which already talked about, and I also brought up one example a bit earlier. Also, we are in a slightly different place now, and contrary to the past popular belief that the brands don't have a leverage over the suppliers and the recruiters, from what we are observing and what we see, actually they do, right? And maybe I'm oversimplifying over here, but if in the past the leverage was needed to convince them to do the right thing, now the leverage can be used not to convince necessarily the new ones, but actually to show those who are trying to do the right thing the light in the tunnel. There is a business case for it, right? And I'm saying that from our experience, we believe that actually they have a leverage because we've been asked and we facilitate a number of engagements or networkings or exposures, for the lack of a better word, and Anna, you know what I'm talking about, between the recruiters to the employers and the big brands and the industry groups behind them. They wanted to hear from them, yes, we want you to do it this way. If you do it this way, you will have a business with us. And that's exactly what we expect you, like point by point. We have I remember from a couple of interventions, and we need you to do it not because it's the right thing to do, because we have to do it. So in order so that we can do it, you also need to do the same thing, right? So I would not underestimate the power, the leverage of the brands that they have currently over the suppliers and even the recruiters, right? To convince them, look, do the right thing, move on, stay on track, stay on trajectory. There will be a business for you in that sense. And the other aspect also what I wanted to indicate is, well, you talked about no need to reinvent the wheel, there's a lot of tools, but also team up as a brand within the industry and across the industries as well, right? That will increase your leveraging power as well. The other aspect which also might be helpful for the brands is, and we all talked about it, but there's even more emerging, more new coming supply chain due diligence legislation. There's a EU CSDD directive coming up. It's really a big game changer across the board, and really the brands will have to do more than just reporting that something is happening. They will have to show that they have skin in the game in that sense. So that's for the brands. For the suppliers, they would need to, meaning the producers, they would need, and the actual employers, they'll probably need to realistically factor in the recruitment fees and costs and ethical recruitment elements into their procurement decisions when you talk about the money, which will also influence them to do the smart and responsible way of recruiting. Because if in the past was like, oh, I just recruit, everything is okay, it doesn't matter from where, I'm not paying anything. Now if they need to pay, they need to be more smart about it. Where do I recruit from? How do I recruit? If I have 5 agents and 7 sub-agents, and everybody has to be compensated, because everybody has to be compensated, or can I actually make it shorter? Maybe direct recruitment is not the way for me, but maybe there are ways to go a bit more smarter about this. The other thing for the suppliers would be as simple as, I know that it sounds simple, but just run consistently fair and ethical business and treat your workers well, right? And we see from our work it pays off because it will be recognized by the employer, your employer clients, by your local governments, which can then, and I'll get to the point what the governments can do about it, but most importantly by the workers. We've witnessed, and I know Cierto and IMR, you guys can also speak to it, if sometimes there is already connection between the employer, recruiter, and the big brand, but the workers don't trust it because they heard somewhere, and William can speak even more, and other colleagues as well. Well, I'm not sure I want to work with this employer. No, there is already growing competition between the countries, between the demand side, right? If you don't do the right thing, the workers will be smart enough, and they'll go maybe to another country. They're not necessarily any more desperate to go to this country. And the part of the whole movement of the worker empowerment, worker voice, is to give the workers this agency to say, look, maybe I shouldn't be going anymore working over here. Maybe I can try somewhere else, because that's kind of where we are getting here at this point of time. So that's something also to be considered. And when the recruitment is done in a smart way, it does contribute to the reducing the cost of migration, reducing the cost of the recruitment, which will make it more financially viable. And the last piece for the government is we are the intergovernment organization, IOM. We understand sometimes it's hard to pass the law, right? There's a lot of moving pieces. There's the politics, all the other things. And sometimes passing the law is not the best way to move forward because one law passed, there's always the way to go around it, find a way, and there's also issue with enforcement. And sometimes the stick approach, like our friends from World Employment Confederation call it, is not the best, the most optimal way forward. What we found more effective on the government side is incentivizing good practice, right? Maybe not across the board, but identify the good actors. Maybe not even they don't have to do it. Just create the incentives for the good practice to encourage good practice and to sustain it in the long run for the recruiters and for the employers. We at IOM, we have the whole menu of different things what it could be. We understand not always all the tools work, but it can do. And the good thing about this in the financial terms is if you incentivize good practice, you get the recognition, people are more encouraged to do the right thing, right? And also you reduce actually the cost of migration. Then more people want to join the club because you prove the concept in that sense as well. Sometimes bilateral agreements can help, but it's not always easy and the best solution because sometimes it takes a lot of time to come up with bilateral agreement which describes the cost, transparency, no more than this. But then if there's no market demand for it, for this agreement to be implemented, then it's not implemented. A lot of time was spent, right? But incentivizing good practice is probably something which does the trick and actually gets the interest from the recruiters and the employers because there's only so much how far they can go on the enthusiasm on doing the right thing. If they see the tangible benefits that they can grasp from doing the right thing, they will continue doing it and more will come along. It doesn't have to be financial. It can be reduced processing time, right? Or I know what you were saying, I need 5,000 workers in a short span of time, right? How do we accommodate for this? It doesn't have to be for free, right? What other things can be done? Mm-hmm. Stop here.
Great, thanks, Pavel. We have 11 minutes for questions. I believe I've beaten
Wow,
the
11 minutes. That's
so
wonderful.
far.
I'm very excited about this panel, but I resisted sending in questions myself. I have tons. But these are all your questions, which I've roughly clustered around the theme of cost. We have a lot of queries on the issue of cost sharing. We have one that's asking, are there any examples or models where suppliers and buyers or brands or retailers share the cost of transitioning to this more responsible way of recruitment and no longer expect migrant workers to subsidize their cost of operation? On the same theme of cost, we have one that's asking about cash flow, right? For the ethical recruiters, do you have any cash flow problems if you cannot take the fees from the workers straight up? So talk honestly about that. And another one is about fraudulent recruiters. There's a question about whether or not there are people purporting to be ethical. For example, with your partners, Kamel, for the pink collars, is that a problem that you often encounter where people pretend to be ethical when they're not? And there's a last one, I think, Pava, you're perhaps the best position to address it quickly, is whether or not there's a database of ethical recruiters. So you can take that.
Perennial question.
All right, thank you very much.
If I had a penny for every time I get asked that question. Give us the list of the perfect agencies. Carmel, let's come to you. That question of cost and cost sharing, you've had some experience, I think, with that blended finance model. So I'd love to hear from you about that, and then the cash flow, and then also fraudulent recruiters. Maybe you could take all three and we'll go around.
Sure. Just quickly on the cash flow, of course, right, as an investor, this is an area we really want to support social entrepreneurs. I mean, we're about to lend additional funding to Pink Collar in their expansion, but also growing their team and this cash flow constraint coming out of COVID, right? And so for us, the repayment model for that is really based on then their placement numbers in the future. So it doesn't also then tie up a fixed rate of a fee or return to Honest Job. So we're very impact first, slow capital that, recruiters at this stage that are trying to be ethical, that are trying to grow, need this kind of patient capital. And the question around ethical or recruiters pretending to be ethical, our model really in terms of our investment criteria and our due diligence process is working with, of course, our pro bono lawyers to vet out our network and agencies. And really the investment model for us is kind of a way for us to be able to have insights into our agencies that we invest in. So we have a board seat, we have access to their records and financials, and are able to then also veto work orders when we have that as part of our shareholder structure and agreements. And so this is for us important and not just helping in the early stages capacity building, but really a long-term investment to really guide the entrepreneur and the recruiter into fair and ethical and sustainable practices. And again, we also follow IRIS standards. None of our agencies currently are IRIS certified, but our Hong Kong agency here, Fair Employment Agency, has been part of the capacity building and also the mock audit. And so some of those learnings and also tools we've implemented across our investees until such time they're large enough and have operational support to really be IRIS certified. So we are looking forward to having that as part of the model as well.
Fantastic, Carmel, thank you. Pranay, over to you. And those questions, just as a reminder, were about the cost sharing between suppliers and brands. Have you seen any models there, cash flow and fraudulent recruiters?
Yes. Okay. When we are talking about cash flow, yes, we've come across a lot of employers who are still traditional at mind, who would try and delay the payments. But of course, we would appeal all the employers to pay us in advance. That would be very nice because we are running on a very, very small profit. So our service fee is very small. So in that context, also you could understand. And of course, I would also urge the buyers and then the investors to actually put extra emphasis on the ethical recruitment, in the sense that especially their franchise, their subsidiaries in the supply chains, especially in the countries where they hire a lot of migrant workers. And as for the fraudulent ethical recruiters, as for the fraudulent recruitment agencies is concerned, I would like to put it in a very simple manner. Simple manner in the sense that if an employer should be willing to pay all the recruitment costs and let the agency know that he has got a lot of orders coming in from behind on the later stage, definitely, be it any agency, they would try their best to not take fees from the workers, as because all of the agencies across the world would like to have a sustainable business. So I believe it is not just always the agencies that create an issue. Of course, it has to be from the top level as well.
Thank you for that reminder, Pranay. That's a very important point. Pavel, over to you on the question of, is there a database of ethical recruiters?
Yeah,
Where is it?
So let's put it simply. Yes, there is a list. There's more than one list. Is it public? No. Right? From the publicly available information, you have a list of certified recruiters, not just 2 IRIS. I just learned greatly, but we have 2 recruiters certified. Can I say it, Andy? 2 recruiters certified in Myanmar to on the level. There are also 2 recruiters certified in the US, I believe, to Clearview. We have 1 IRIS certified recruiter, another one in the pipeline, which is also available public information on the IRIS certification website. So that's about it, what is in the public domain, right? We do know that there is a list of good recruiters, but really the good ones who are doing the right thing, not just on paper, right? It's not public. There's plenty of reasons why it's not public. There's plenty of conversations. Should it be public? Should it be not public? Should it be partially public or not? I'm looking at William and a couple of other folks. We've been having a lot of, it's an ongoing conversation now that we are not there yet. But I would also flip the question, because that's how we perceive it. Do we have a list of good employers as well? Because actually, let's not forget, it takes 2 to tango to make it work, right? You might have a good recruiters, but they will be out of business. You have a big list of good recruiters, but the list may be completely outdated, and recruiters can be out of business if there's no equally like-minded thinking employers, not the big brands, but the clients of those recruiters, right? And in that perspective, for us, what's important is the goal is not to have recruiters certified, right? The goal is for the ethical recruiters to sustain their business. And certification or any kind of other recognitions, for the lack of a better word, is the means to help them sustain those businesses, right? And for them to sustain those businesses, they need to have the employees on the same page. We just spoke about this again with Andy over lunch. You need to have those employers, and they need to be there for good and also committed, because you might very easily have a situation where they have certified recruiter. If 2 years down the line, the project is over, the employees moved on somewhere else, they're out of business. And they actually have more to lose than to gain, right? So it's a longer version. The quick version is, yes, there are lists, there's even more than one list. It's not, is it public? No, it's not. But let's also think about the really, for real, a good list of the employees as well. And then we can start connecting them both together. And if it works, then we can publicly showcase the good work done.
And yeah, thank you for bringing us back to that question of demand. I'll say for the Responsible Recruitment Program, there is a list. There's a list of what we call participating recruitment agencies, and that's public on the Responsible Business Alliance website. And so that leads us to a challenge of there needs to be that ongoing verification, right? So there might be a list, but you need to continually update it, continually make sure that that they're continually participating in some form of capacity building and or audit. I believe that's all we have time for. I have 1 minute left. Bonnie, should we see if there's other questions, or should we wrap up exactly on time? What would you prefer? Do you want to bring one of your questions, Bonnie, then?
One of my questions. Wow. Which one do I pick? Okay, so I'll pick this, and it's something that Carmel and I have been discussing. She laughs at 2 a.m. Hong Kong time. So my question is, cross-border migration is difficult, right? Because we're dealing with different regulations. We need people who understand specific challenges, in the corridors, and that's differentiated by sector. Oftentimes further differentiated by, gender and the people doing the work. Ethical recruiters oftentimes, we struggle with building this network, right? Of a network of people who can learn from each other, of just talking to each other and doing this. I know in the context of Taiwan, where it's hard to find ethical recruiters in the country of origin, and that's further divided by the sector of work we're looking at. So my question to you is, how can we expedite this process, so that we can ensure that the integrity of the whole migration corridor in terms of responsible recruitment is maintained?
Brilliant question. Carmel?
I don't know if that's a question for me, but yes, Hi, Bonnie. Nice to hear your voice. I think what's been great about Honest Jobs is, recruiters have been coming out of the woodworks and kind of creating this network of ethical recruiters to really learn from each other. And our investee out of Singapore was really more interested, yes, of course, the monetary support and guidance, but he wanted to have a team to talk to and share insights and challenges, because you're working with people crossing borders and you deal with a lot of daily interactions with both workers and employers that are abrasive, sad, and all of these things that you need mentorship and guidance, and also other people's in the market that understand, and you're not alone in the journey as an ethical recruiter. And I think this is important in terms of, creating spaces like this, inviting folks like myself, Pranay, and maybe in the future other recruiters to share their experiences. And I mean, Joe's in the audience at CRTO, so like we found each other also, and we talk collectively. And I think expanding that ecosystem, you need more funding, more support, all these things that we've talked about on this call. And I think we're looking for each other to share these insight challenges, and how do we create opportunities to move past some of these challenges, because we've learned from other markets what we're learning as an ecosystem, and as we're building that ecosystem, and I'm learning from Singapore, Malaysia, we're able to actually disrupt and transform our sector, because we're not starting from scratch, but we're learning as we go, and there's other people to learn from, and I've learned from Pranay and other folks. So I think that's what's really needed, is for us to meet each other and to share challenges and support the growth of ethical recruiters.
That's fantastic. Carmel, we'll let you have that last word. Really, really appreciate you. Thank you, Pranay, as well, for being up so incredibly late at night or early in the morning. Thank you for sharing your experiences and allowing us to learn from you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Pavel, too.
Thank you.